Welcome to the Tap No Taco podcast. I'm Takato, and my goal here is to help you transition from the military to your civilian career or business. Today, I bring on Danae, a leader in data analytics and a military spouse. We talk about why she chose data analytics, the importance of a brag sheet, and regaining your sense of community after a PCS. If you're interested in data analytics or want to know how to navigate your career during a PCS move, this episode is for you. Hope you enjoy it.
In the Subaru with my Nikes on the dash. In the Subaru with my Nikes on the dash. In the Subaru with my Nikes on the dash. Nikes on the dash, Nikes on the dash.
We'll go ahead and kick things off. So, Danae, thank you so much for joining the Tapping with Taco podcast. Really happy to be, for you to be here today. I think you are the first military spouse to be a guest on my podcast. So, super excited to have you. I'll have you quickly give an intro about yourself, and then we can dive into some of the topics.
Well, thank you for having me. Honored to be the first. Hopefully there's more military spouses that join. So I'm Danae. I've been a military spouse, married for 5 years, but been with my husband for 8 years of his active duty service. So I've been a military spouse, and I've also been very dedicated to my career during that time. And so I've really focused on being active in the analytics space, and that's where I've started my career and continue my career as a director of data analytics as well as data engineering at BombBomb.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. So I think I found you through LinkedIn, through Gabe. I know a lot of my previous episodes have been heavy on the data analytics side.
Yes.
Director of analytics. Can you talk to us kind of what your current role is? And then maybe we'll start with how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, not surprised. Analytics is a hot topic right now. It's a hot place to be. So excited about that. So as a director of data and analytics right now, I've been at my current organization for 4 years. What I really focus on is the strategy of the team on our analytics side as well as our data engineering side, and align that with the business and the goals of our 1-year plan and 3-year plan. So I really focus on that, as well as mentorship and development of the team is a main focus of myself. So I have a 4-person team right now, so 2 analysts and 2 data engineers. So really focus on making sure that we're helping provide a lot of value to the organization and align ourselves with the goal, as well as communicating with multiple stakeholders, as well as mentoring and developing all those people so that they can continue their own career growth. As I kind of stepped in this role, I've been in the analytics space for almost 10 years now, and I had a lot of experience on all different types of analytics. I was a marketing analyst, I was a product analyst, business intelligence. So I kind of grew up in the analytics kind of space. And what's really excited me is through that path, I kind of found this place of leadership that I found where I really enjoy mentoring people. I really enjoy being able to speak to multiple stakeholders and align myself and the team within the organization. And so I've been very lucky to be able to continue to progress in my career, as well as, had the experience I did. During what got me into analytics first is I was a finance major, minor in computer science. I then realized I graduated college. I was I don't want to go into traditional finance, but I loved modeling. I loved telling stories with information, and I loved how I could connect and understand the business. And that's really what drove me to analytics in that space. And so I worked in the SaaS, software as a service, or SaaS space. I've also worked in e-commerce space, and I continue to just find analytics is really used within all types of organizations, which is very exciting.
That's a really interesting point you brought up just now. Is you there was this specific kind of function of around what your major was and what you wanted to do, but then you figured out you wanted to do something else. Was there a turning point in this portion of your career early on where you how did you figure out, I guess, what that you wanted to shift into one thing versus another thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. So analytics in school has become a newer thing where you can actually study analytics, right? And when I was in school, though, it wasn't a major. It wasn't they had classes around it. And so I did find that I was pioneering something. I was oh, I'm doing something new that no one's ever done, right? And I've always kind of been that way, where I've wanted to go down the path that no one's traveled yet and maybe pioneer my way. But I think the thing that really helped me is I was lucky enough to be in Silicon Valley. I went to school out in San Francisco. And so I was able to network really well and talk to people that were doing data analytics. And I really started to explore people doing data analytics versus people that were doing like finance specific topics like, stock management, financial planning, like all those things. And I just through networking and talking to people, I started to ask them, hey, what do you do in your job? What do you like about your job? What don't you like about your job? How has your career progression looked? And I just started to find that like the things that people talked about in analytics really align with the values and the things that I felt like were very important for me. And that's kind of what got me into that analytics space. I'll also say I had a mentor that showed me, I was interning and I was actually a sales mentor or intern at the time, but someone showed me the value of like having information that no one else could see because either no one knew it existed or they hadn't gotten access to it, and like how valuable that could be to the organization. So like in this example, we found some statistics around website visits and we were able to say like, hey, this type of blog or this type of experience is bringing more people to the website and we're converting more. And that's like something no one had seen before. And it was like a really big aha moment. And I kind of got like hooked on that. Like I got hooked on like being able to find stuff and then like explain it and be like tie it directly to value. So that's what I would say was be like the turning point and why I decided to kind of not go the traditional finance route and go more data analytics.
Yeah, that's really interesting you mentioned that because a lot of the times you're guessing as far as what data do we have, but really using the analytics is amazing to hear.
Yeah.
And one thing you just mentioned that I really want to touch on is you were networking a lot to figure out like what you wanted to do, and like kind of it sounded like you were really figuring out like what people do on a day-to-day basis, what their role was like, what they liked, what they didn't like, right? And for the military spouses that are listening that want to get into the data analytics space, what do you recommend that they do from like a networking perspective to figure out if data analytics is right for them, or like how do they get into analytics in the first place?
Yeah, this is a great question. So there's what I would recommend in kind of my path. So there's a few options. One, from a military spouse perspective, there are resources out there for military spouse as well as transitioning or service members. So career services has a lot of these opportunities. There's programs like Hiring Your Heroes that work with spouses as well as service members. So if you're a military spouse, tap into those networks, tap into those abilities to, get access to this stuff. Go to your local career service, talk with people, and that's a great space to go and be able to, try to find an internship directly with a company. So Hiring Your Heroes, Career Services can help with that. But they also help with certificates for like the technical, you know, SQL, Python, R that you might need to be an analyst. The other thing is I would really tap into like your network on that. And networking can be just knowing someone in the space. So just reaching out and saying, hey, like, what do you do from a day to day? Can I pick your brain about like what did you do to get into that? Network can be like finding people on LinkedIn and following them. The other thing is that I've really found a lot of value is in Slack communities. There's a lot of great Slack communities for people in the data analytics space or wanting to get into data analytics. I'll plug one, which is Locally Optimistic is one for anyone. And then one that I'm really passionate about is Data Angels Community. It was founded by Jessica, and she's really focused on people that identify as women in the analytics space of bringing them together and sharing information. Myself and three other women in that Slack group, we just put on a mentorship program. So we're connecting mentees and mentors together. And some of the mentees are just now getting into analytics. Some of them have been in analytics and they're trying to make more career growth. Some people are like applying to jobs and we're helping them do that. So I encourage you to like reach out to those places. You can find a lot of these Slack communities, just by Googling stuff. You can find them on LinkedIn. But just get involved in those and start asking questions, start listening to how people talk about analytics. And then the third one is like, if it is something you're passionate about, like start talking about it. Even if that's just on LinkedIn, even if it's you just having conversations, like start talking about it so you kind of understand the trends, what's happening, and you can kind of speak with that. So that's what I really recommend. And then just again, military spouses, we do have those resources, so tap into those.
I really wanted to bring up the data angels part just because I saw you posting a lot about that on LinkedIn. Can you
Yeah.
tell us more about Like, how do people get involved with that, or any more details you can share? I think it's an awesome thing that you're doing, being a mentor for people who are trying to get into that space.
Yeah, for sure. So for Data Angels, like if you're interested in this, find us on LinkedIn. Just type in Data Angels. We have a Slack community. It's about I think we're over 1,000 people members strong, which is awesome. So a lot of what happens here is like you get added to the Slack community. We have different obviously channels that you can are interested in. It's share successes, share jobs, uh, bio and like bio and health space, technology space. There's like ask questions, which is really exciting. So that's awesome. Jessica and other people that are very involved, they put on monthly webinars for people. So I was just able to be on a panel for one about hiring managers, like advice to people looking for jobs, which is awesome. We did another two-part series to that of people that have just recently accepted jobs, like their advice for job searching. So those are great resources. Like I said, they're monthly webinars. Then the mentorship program is really exciting, and we're about to start our second cohort here in June or July area. The mentorship cohort, we were able to match people based on kind of what they wanted to dive into. We were able to get a diverse set of mentors that have experience in technology, leadership, career changes, all that, and really match people up and align them well with what their outcomes were. So that's really exciting, and I think a great place to take opportunity, as well as just like start to talk to people about how do I get into analytics, listen to people's advice, understand what they're doing that's on par with kind of the trends of analytics. So that's been a great community, and everyone there is just amazing. So I would say reach out to them, find us on LinkedIn. And then if you have any confusion, reach out to me directly, and happy to connect you and get you added to the Slack channel.
Awesome, awesome. Are there any restrictions or limitations, or is it as long as you kind of fit the criteria of you identify as a female or as a woman, then you can join that space?
Yeah, that's it. So we are trying to, focus on women who are in this space. As an analytics space, women are a minority still in the data analytics space. And so we just want to have a community that we feel safe to talk about certain things and feel supported. So it's a great place to come. And like I said, if you don't identify as a woman, locally optimistic is just as great. I'm highly involved in that. And I mean, there's people that are posting there every single day, can learn a lot of the same things. There's constantly webinars, constant learning, great connection. So I would also say locally optimistic, which you can find just directly on Google. And you just have to fill out a form for them, and you can get added to that Slack community.
Cool, cool. Data Angels, locally optimistic. Check them out. Awesome.
Yes.
So let's shift gears here a little bit. In your world as a military spouse, obviously being in the military, there's lots of movement, lots of PCSs. I helped my wife when she PCS from Germany over back to the stateside. It's hectic, right? And
Yeah.
so I know we were talking before today. You had to PCS 4 times in the last 4 years, which is crazy, right? That's a lot of moving, right? Hard to settle down.
Yeah.
Um, and you were still able to kind of still hone in on your craft and maintain kind of your career progression and maintain all your work life balance there. Do you have any tips for people on how they can kind of approach their management on these PCS moves and be able to kind of navigate through these challenging times?
Yeah. Well, first of all, don't PCS 4 times in 4 years. It's not the ideal situation, but you got to do what the Army asks you to do. Um, so for me, I'll kind of walk you through like how I was able to be successful. Like for me, the first PCS move that really challenged me, I had to give up my job and change my job completely, right? And that was like the biggest challenge for me. And I think a lot of it came to just your family matters and you want to be with your family. And so, like, that's what really motivated me. And that one was the most challenging one. And then the last couple ones have been easier just because I was able to have a conversation with my management team and able to approach it a little bit differently. So, one, PCS moves are stressful for a lot of reasons. There's a loss of community, you're moving all your stuff, you're starting over in some ways. You don't know what sometimes the future is going to look like. Also, as a military spouse, like supporting your spouse and your partner and your family during that time can be very stressful because they're also having to relearn a new job sometimes, or they're having to get challenged in a new way that they haven't been. And when that's happening so often, you become a support system as well as like coordination of getting all your stuff in an area and getting settled, as well as you're still an employee. So I think one thing is like I really found that after these PCSs, like really focusing on what matters. So making sure you're taking time for yourself, making sure that you're taking time off work to do these things, making sure that you're taking time that if you can enjoy your PCS move. I mean, I know some people they get a stop and they do fun things. Like do that and like make sure that you're doing that. Work's always going to be there, but like enjoy as much as you can out of this. It would just be my one thing. And then in terms of how I've approached this, so really the way that I approach this, and I'll kind of give the example, is my husband just gone back from deployment in the Middle East for 9 months. And then we got orders to PCS in like 2 months after he just got back. I was working and I was an in person job. And I wanted to stay with my organization. I was very committed. I was growing a lot and I was progressing well in my career. And so I think the first thing is that you need to identify what you want out of a conversation with your management team. So there's kind of three options in my mind. You want to stay and you want to be full-time remote. You want to stay and you want to commit to coming back however often you all agree upon, or three, you want to leave that organization. And all three of those options are totally valid, but being very honest with yourself of like what is the option I think is important. And then the second one is like communication as early as possible and being transparent is very it's the best approach as I've found in my career. So for me, when I found out that we were going to move and that I was going to have to choose between my family and my job, I was obviously always will choose my family, but I also was very committed to my career growth. So I entered in a conversation with my manager, and I'll say this, you want to enter into the conversation almost like a salary negotiation where you are one kind of committed, making sure that they know you're very committed to the organization, you're committed to the growth, you value where the future of them, you want to be a part of that. But also you kind of bring in, here's what I've done, here's the value that I bring, here's some projects that I've been able to complete. So you're also kind of being able to brag a little bit about yourself to make sure that you are showing how valuable you are to the organization. So I entered into a conversation. I said, this is very challenging for me, but I'm very committed to the organization. I'm excited about the growth. I want to be here. I want to be a part of this team. Here's what I think I can bring in terms of value. And then we kind of agreed upon me staying with them, but like being more remote and trying that out for a while. And so we decided to do that. And so I was traveling from Colorado to Missouri back and forth a bunch. And then COVID hit, and COVID caused a lot of organizations, right, to go to remote friendly to help protect people. And that's where I really found an opportunity that I could still be very successful with good communication, understanding how to add a lot of value to the organization through asking good questions, understanding the long-term strategy of the organization. And I also could continue to build relationships while being remote full time. So I was really able to transition and show my leadership team that I could be successful in this space, right? So I then entered in another conversation and said, hey, I believe I'm doing very well from this remote standpoint. I would like to continue this. This is best for my family and myself. And so that's how I would kind of approach it. And again, I was very honest about like, I wanted to stay with the organization. I was willing to travel for them. Now I'm not as willing to travel for them as much. I mean, I still go back once a quarter, but it wasn't as much just because it doesn't work for me and my family right now. But at that time it worked. And then the thing is I was very honest with them, communication up front as early as possible. And then the last thing, just as military spouses, is always check with your pay. Your pay does get a little bit interesting when you're constantly moving. So there are certain laws and acts out there that do protect you, that you're able to move but keep your pay in one state where you can pay taxes, and it makes it easier on your employment. So I would say just make sure you're doing your research, talk to someone in your payroll department, make sure you're doing everything legally, because moving as a military spouse can be hard and challenging in that. And you just want to make sure you're doing the right things and following the acts that protect us.
That's all. There's a lot to unpack there and lots of good information. And I really want to dive into like a lot of these different pieces that you talked about. But the first one I want to ask is, so you had to have that conversation with your leadership, right? And there's two parts I want to ask here. One is like, what was that conversation like? Right? I'm sure it was like really nervous to kind of go through that. I would be super nervous to even talk to that topic. And then two is, What did you do to prepare to make sure you had all, like, obviously you're in data analytics, but you have the data to back you up for those kind of conversations?
Yeah. So the first one was I was very, very nervous. I was also kind of emotional because my husband just gone back and I was like, I can't believe we're in this situation again. So it was very, it was, it was hard. And so what I actually did is I didn't go to my manager first. I had a mentor within the organization and I said, hey, I want to run this idea by you. Like, I want to say, like, do you think this is okay for me to ask for this type of, you know, this is asking for something new. It's almost like asking for more money because you're asking to be have something that someone else in that whole organization does not have, right? And so I entered in a conversation. I will say, I would say if you're a high performer and you're like highly valued at the organization, right? You also have to know that. Like if you're someone that like maybe you're just not enjoying the work that you're doing, maybe you're not performing to the best ability as maybe the job's not the right fit for you or something like that. Like this conversation is going to be much tougher, I believe, than like if you're a high performer, you're performing well, you know that your value in the organization. So one is just kind of like understanding that of yourself, but it was very nerve wracking. But I think communication and just like being very upfront is very important. So I didn't hide anything. I said this is very challenging. I was very honest about that. I told them my still very committed to this organization, why I enjoyed working at the organization, why I felt like I could continue to add value to our 1 to 3 year plan. And then you asked another question about like how did I prepare for that? So personally, I learned this from someone, but I kind of every quarter I write down like a brag sheet for myself. I don't share it with anyone, but I like write down everything that I accomplished in that quarter. And I spend about 2 hours of just reflection. So I have this like Google Doc and it's just like open and I say like, here's everything that I feel like I've accomplished. And it just allows for me to really like know one to be reflective of like things that I did well as like reflect on like what could I have done better at the same time. But I think like having that in my back pocket allowed for me to like go in with confidence when I was talking to my manager and be like, hey, here's everything that I've done. And so we both know this is right. And so how can I continue to do this for you, but just in a different area? So like I'm in a different state. I'm more going to be on Zoom calls rather than in person. So the brag sheet has really helped me. And like I said, I just schedule 2 hours at the end of every quarter. I write down all the accomplishments. And then I also write down a few things that like I didn't do as well as I wanted to or I want to improve on. And that's really helped me personally, one, be able to reflect on that. And so I think two, just like as women, we can kind of be really hard on ourselves and we can be very much like don't want to talk about what we're proud of that we've done, the work that we've done. So I think as women too, like it's really important for myself to like be able to step in that place and kind of like be able to celebrate myself. And so that's been very exciting.
I love that piece because my manager tells me that all the time, and she's the one who keeps telling me, make sure you write these down, reflect on these things. And it's awesome that you're sharing this too, because even for a military spouse or just anybody in general, I think it's great career advice to just
Mhm.
write things down so you can reflect on it. Especially because sometimes you like forget what you already had for lunch last week. So if you write things down in your work related things, you can go back and reflect on it. But diving into that a little bit more, as far as like your notes and your reflections of what you do in work, how detailed do you get in those notes? And do you have any tips for people who don't do that today that or are hearing this and I'm like, oh, I should start doing this now?
Yeah. So some of it I do get really detailed, but like you said, like you forget what you had for lunch a week ago. So sometimes it's like hard. It's like hard to remember everything that you've done. So if there's moments of something that like big happened and I was very proud of it in the moment, or I got good feedback from someone, I will write that down right away. So, it, for example, like someone slacked me and they're like, hey, I just want to give you some really great feedback. You did this thing very, very well. I'll just like copy and paste that and like stick it in my brag notebook and I'll just like put who said it. And then if there's other moments, like I do that real time. And then I can come back to it in the quarter and I can be like, oh, I did this thing really, really well. And like remind myself that someone else saw that. The other way I do it is I'll go through if you it depends on how you kind of work, but like for us, we work off of project list and we like have projects that we do and they're about 2 to 3 week projects. I'll kind of like dive into each project and I'll reflect on like what went well, what didn't go well or like what I was proud of this project. I'll probably get a little bit more detailed if it's something that I would see myself putting on my resume or wanting to speak more about. If it's not, I'll just like put down a really quick sentence and be like, this project written really well, or hey, do this in the future, like run this analysis in the future, right? Like that proved out to be very well. Other ones I'll get a little bit more detailed on and be like bullet points, right? Of like kind of like you're building out kind of a resume based on it, because you can also then use these if you ever are job searching or you're ever going to want to update your LinkedIn, something like that. You can kind of use these little snippets to then put that on there and like highlight how you added value. I also, if I can like see the actual quantitative value that I brought, so if I increase revenue, increase conversion rates, I will also note that down. And so it's a little bit of way to like tie quantitatively the work that I've done to the whole organization.
That's awesome. You're showing a little of your analytic skills right there, just slipping
Yeah.
that in. That's awesome to hear. One thing that I want to jump back to that you mentioned before as part of the challenges in the PCSing is the loss of sense of community. And I think that's really big, especially nowadays where there's a lot of remote work. And it makes it even more challenging when you're jumping from duty station to duty station. What are some things that you did to kind of regain your sense of community every time that you PCSed?
Yeah, it's hard. I think the one during COVID was the hardest because like people were like scared to go out, people were scared to like get together, and so like that one was like the most challenging like for my husband and I. And it's kind of like the first time that I went remote with my work. So one, I've been very lucky that like our culture at my organization is very much like relationships are important and relationships are first. So it's very apparent and very natural for people to like just jump on a call and like get to know each other, or sign up for donut buddies, which is like once a month you meet with someone. So that's really where like I found a lot of value, is just like being willing and open to like having conversations with people, calling someone out and be like, hey, I haven't met you yet, would you want to grab coffee together, or sign up for donut buddies or something like that if your organization has it, because that's how you're going to get to know each other, build those relationships in those communities. The other one is, I already mentioned, but the Slack communities again have been super useful. There's donut buddies within the Slack community. So once a month, I meet someone random. They could be in New York. I met someone in Australia. I've talked to people in Europe. And it's all about joining community. And like, even when I post on LinkedIn, someone I talk to and I only met them through donut buddies, they're like sharing my posts and they're like engaging with me, which is awesome, right? Because it just means that I have community all over the world. So that's been really exciting. And then I think as a military spouse, there's a ton of programs, right? The WMR, I believe I'm saying that right, but that's a great program within your, on post. Get involved with other organizations within your community, within your spouses, type of brigade or lower level, whatever that looks like get involved there. And that is also a way to really like start to have that community and make sure that you have the people around you, because it is hard. It is challenging. We have to move away from our families a lot of times. We end up losing friends a lot of the time. And so you want to make sure that you're investing in that. And that's really important. So I didn't do that as much when I was first kind of a newer military spouse, but now I know how important that is. And like, I've made that a priority every time I've moved. And I think continuing to do that type of work is really important. So there's like, you need to take care of yourself personally. And then from a work side, really just focus on, reaching out to people, being willing to jump on a call with someone, be willing to say, hey, want to grab coffee, either virtually or on, in person. So that's just been my key.
Have you been involved with any of the JBLM stuff for military spouses down there?
I haven't been as involved just because my husband's actually in the kind of transitioning out, so we're like a little bit less. But when I was at Fort Carson, I helped out with our, forget what it's called now, but it's where the spouses help with planning events, volunteering, like all that. So I was super involved in Fort Carson, especially when my husband was deployed. I really leaned into that community, went to a lot of events, went to a lot of networking events, but also just to hang out, because we're all going through this together and it's nice to feel that community, right? But there's amazing opportunities. it's fun. I go to workout classes at JBLM, which is really awesome. So like getting to know people that way is really fun. And then they do a ton of things to support families. So get more involved in that. I do think there's obviously some of those are still very underutilized and also underfunded in that area. But I think as we continue to show up, as you continue to, you know, try those different things out, it's really important. And I'm sure you're going to find at least one or two people that you walk away being like really good friends with.
For those military spouses that are kind of looking to get into data science, I know you mentioned some of the previous resources earlier, but are there any other resources that you'd recommend that they tap into if they're looking to get into data analytics?
Yeah, so I think it matters like where you're at. So one thing, if you're just now getting into analytics, there's the potential that you're behind and from some of the technical abilities that are needed or technical skill sets that are needed for an analyst. So there's a lot of different resources out there. There's some free, there's some paid. There's also some like boot camps versus not. So a few Google has a data certificate course. I've heard only great things about this. It is like a 6-month program. You do have to pay for it, but I've heard like great things about it. And I've seen people come out of it that actually like have a good understanding of the code base. So that's really great. When I was learning SQL, I kind of self-taught myself and I used W3 Schools. It's a free SQL, you can Google it. You can learn SQL through that way about the syntax, all that. There's also a ton of great resources that I could name, but like honestly, just Googling is the best thing that I send people to. But there's a ton of great resources for Python and R too. So I think one is like figuring out how you best learn. If you learn independently and you just want to see problem set over problem set again, go to something like W3 Schools, do it on your own time. If you want more hands-on approach where they're going to take you through different steps and different spaces where you need to, gather these skill sets, go to a boot camp, do type of school because you're going to learn the best out of that. And then the other one is just like find someone that's willing to mentor you, find someone that's willing to spend an hour a week or, an hour a month and just like have you ask them questions, run them through practice problems. I've created practice problems from people and like send them to them and then we like walk through them. I've also created like what we call like workshop hours where like we all come and like work on a problem together and then I like ask everyone like, well, why did you go about it that way, or like how did you go about it this way, and like we all share ideas. And so those are great opportunities if you can get involved with those. And then I think for military spouses, like tap into hiring your heroes, tap into these areas where like you can actually do real internships with companies and you're going to get on the job experience and learning so that one, you get exposure to things because you can go to these boot camps, you can learn, but it's really getting direct exposure to like how a database is set up at an organization, how the schemas are all designed, how you're joining different tables together, how you're solving business problems is really the most value add. So tap into those resources, especially since we have those as a military spouse and they're super helpful. And I've seen them, be great for people that are transitioning.
Are there any any final thoughts that you'd like to share with military spouses or any military service members that are looking to transition out?
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned my husband's in the transition period right now. I've just been I've been very surprised and like very happy to see like how hiring your heroes has been working. He just finished up his CSP, and that was just such a great experience. People were very involved, engaged, wanting to help everyone out. They put on networking events. He went to like three of them here at JBLM, but like I was very surprised by that. That's the first time I've seen that. And like just the amount of help that they help people transitioning and like exposure that they got within organizations was really exciting. So I would for sure like, I never have used that, but it made me like jealous. I was like, I wish that I had this because it was awesome. So I would say like, get involved in that. It can be scary to go to these networking events. It can be kind of, scary to take a chance, but try to take advantage of this if possible. So something like that would be what I would recommend. And then the same thing, like start to follow people on LinkedIn. If you have a LinkedIn, follow people in the analytics space, start a conversation, just reach out to someone and say, hey, I've really enjoyed hearing you talk about XYZ. I would love to like know more about this topic. Would you be willing to chat with me for 30 minutes? People are really willing to do that. They love to, help people. I know a ton of people that would be willing to do that. So like, just reach out, start a conversation. Don't be scared. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is they don't reply or they say no, right? So just be willing to reach out and do that. And then just, join these communities, get yourself involved around talking about analytics, understanding, hearing about analytics, and find someone that's willing to kind of speak to you or ask good questions. So those would be the things that I would recommend for someone kind of trying to get into the analytics space or transitioning. A lot of people, my husband's had friends that are wanting to go into the analytics space, and they've reached out to me, and like I've always shared them. I have like an email that I send them with all these resources and things. Like, be willing to do that. Talk to people that like know spouses, or talk to people within your unit that know other people in this space, and like be able to do that. I mean, the community within the Army or the military has just been so amazing, and everyone's willing to offer their time. So, tap into that.
Awesome final thoughts there. There was so much good content in there. So really appreciate your time, Danae. If people want to get in touch with you or they have any further questions they want to follow up, how do they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so I would say just find me on LinkedIn, first name, last name, and I can give it to you here. But that's how to get in contact me. Like I said, mentoring and like talking about analytics is dear to my heart. So like I am more than happy to answer any questions. If you want to mentor, I'm happy to help with any questions about transitioning to analytics. Or if you're just a military spouse that wants support and community, I'm here for that.
Awesome. I'll make sure I link all that in the show notes. But thank you so much. This is awesome to hear.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and now YouTube. Also, please consider leaving a review and let me know what you think. All the links we talked about will be on the show notes, or you can go to tapinwithtaco.buzzsprout.com. Talk to y'all next time. Peace.